An armed outlaw woman took her place. Though the cowboy was waiting for his mail-order bride, an armed outlaw woman took her place. Though the cowboy was waiting for his mail-order bride, the stagecoach kicked up dust as it rolled into Copper Ridge just before sunset. Jake Henderson stood at the edge of town, his heart pounding against his ribs. 6 months of letters, 6 months of planning, and finally his bride Catherine was arriving from Boston. He built an extra room on his ranch house, bought new curtains, even learned to cook something besides beans and jerky. The stage door swung open and a woman stepped down. But something was immediately wrong. This woman wore men's riding pants under a long coat, boots caked with red desert mud, and a hat pulled low over her eyes. When she looked up, Jake saw a face that was beautiful but hard, with a scar running from her left eyebrow to her cheekbone. She had a revolver on each hip and a rifle strapped to her back. "You, Jake Henderson?" she asked, her voice rough like whiskey and smoke. "I am." "Where's Catherine?" Jake's hand instinctively moved toward his own gun. "Dead. Cholera took her 3 weeks back in Kansas City. I'm Lucy Morgan. I paid the stage driver to bring me here instead." She pulled out a folded wanted poster from her coat and showed it to him. Her own face stared back, offering $500 for armed robbery and assaulting a lawman. "I need a place to hide, and you need a woman to make your homestead claim legal."
"We can help each other." Jake felt his world tilting.
Catherine was dead. This outlaw woman was proposing they pretend to be married. Before he could answer, 3 riders appeared at the far end of the street. Lucy's hand moved to her gun with frightening speed. "They followed me. Those are Garrett's men. He wants me dead because I know where he buried the gold from the Denver bank job. If they take me, they'll kill everyone in this town to keep witnesses quiet." The riders were closing fast. Jake had seconds to decide. He could turn Lucy over and maybe save the town from violence. He could run and save himself. Or he could stand with this dangerous stranger who'd stolen his bride's place. Something in Lucy's eyes made the decision for him, a desperate wildness mixed with determination that he recognized from his own mirror. He'd been desperate, too, when he'd sent for a mail-order bride, alone on his ranch with nothing but cattle and silence. "Get behind me," Jake said, stepping in front of her, "and try not to shoot anybody unless they shoot first. I've got a reputation to keep in this town." Lucy moved beside him instead of behind him, her guns already drawn. "I don't hide behind men, cowboy. You picked the wrong woman if you wanted someone to cook and clean." The 3 riders pulled up 20 feet away. The leader was a thick man with a black beard and eyes like a snake. "That's Cordell," Lucy whispered. "He's killed more men than you've got cattle." Cordell smiled, showing gold teeth. "Lucy Morgan, you've led us on quite a chase. Hand over the map and we'll make it quick. Otherwise, we'll burn this whole town down around you." Part 2, Jake felt sweat running down his back, despite the cool evening air. The main street of Copper Ridge had gone silent. Shopkeepers were pulling their children inside. Old Henry at the general store was loading his shotgun behind the counter. The whole town was about to become a battlefield because of this woman who'd stepped off a stagecoach 5 minutes ago. "There's no map," Lucy said. "I memorized the location. Kill me and the gold stays buried forever." Cordell's smile vanished. "Then you're coming with us. We'll make you talk." He looked at Jake with contempt. "Step aside, farmer. This doesn't concern you." Jake had never considered himself particularly brave. He'd spent most of his life avoiding trouble, working hard, minding his business. But something about Cordell's tone, the casual way he talked about torture and murder, made Jake's blood turn to ice and then to fire. "That makes it my concern. Your funeral." Cordell's hand moved toward his gun. Everything happened at once. Lucy's right pistol barked twice, hitting Cordell's horse in the front legs. The animal screamed and reared, throwing Cordell to the ground. Jake drew and fired at the second rider, clipping his shoulder. The third man got off a shot that whistled past Jake's ear and shattered the window of the saloon behind them. Lucy's left pistol answered, and the third rider slumped in his saddle, clutching his chest. Cordell rolled in the dust and came up shooting. Jake felt a burning line across his ribs as a bullet grazed him. He fired back, but Cordell was already running for cover behind the water trough. The wounded second rider wheeled his horse and galloped back the way they'd come, leaving a trail of blood drops in the dirt. "The church!" Lucy shouted, grabbing Jake's arm. "We need high ground." They ran together across the street, bullets kicking up dust at their heels. The white church at the end of town had a bell tower that overlooked everything. Jake's side was bleeding, but the wound wasn't deep. They crashed through the church doors just as another bullet splintered the wood beside Jake's head. Inside, Reverend Paul was preparing for evening service. He took one look at their guns and the blood on Jake's shirt and pointed to the ladder leading up to the bell tower. "Go, I'll bar the door." Jake climbed first, his ribs screaming with each rung. Lucy came right behind him, reloading her pistols as she climbed. The tower was small and cramped, with open spaces on all four sides for the bell. From here they could see the entire town. Cordell had taken position behind the water trough. Two more riders were approaching from the east, probably the rest of Garrett's gang. "How many men does Garrett have?" Jake asked, tearing a strip from his shirt to bind his wound. "He had 8 when I left. I killed one on the trail. You and I just took down 2 more. That leaves 5 counting Cordell." Lucy scanned the street below. "They won't risk a direct assault now that we have the high ground. They'll wait for dark and try to burn us out. Then we leave before dark. There's a ravine behind the church that leads to the creek. We can follow it north to my ranch. It's 5 miles, mostly through cover." Lucy looked at him with something like respect. "You're not what I expected when I read Catherine's letters. She made you sound soft." "Catherine never knew me. We only wrote letters." Jake reloaded his revolver, checking each chamber carefully. "What about this gold? Is there really a map?" "No map. But the gold is real. 400 pounds of it, buried in the foothills about 30 miles north of here. Garrett and his brother pulled the Denver job 6 months ago. The brother got shot up bad and told me where they hid it before he died. I was working at the saloon where they brought him. Garrett thinks I have a map because that's what I told him when he came asking questions. Figured it would keep me alive longer."
"And now?"
"I want that gold. I want to disappear somewhere Garrett can never find me. Maybe Mexico, maybe California." She paused, looking at him. "You could come with me. Split it down the middle. That's enough money for both of us to start over anywhere we want." Jake thought about his ranch, the cattle he'd worked 3 years to build up, the land his father had homesteaded. He thought about Catherine's letters, her neat handwriting describing a life in Boston that had sounded so foreign and exciting. He thought about the wanted poster in Lucy's coat and the bodies they'd just left in the street. "I can't leave my land. You might not have a choice. You just shot at Garrett's men. He's not the forgiving type. Even if we kill him today, the rest of the gang will hunt you down for revenge." Jake knew she was right. The moment he'd stepped in front of Lucy, he'd crossed the line. There was no going back to his quiet life now. The sun was dropping toward the horizon, painting the sky orange and red. They had maybe an hour of daylight left. Below them, Cordell was moving. He'd circled around to the north side of the church, using buildings for cover. The 2 new riders had split up, one going east and one west, surrounding the church. "Time to move," Jake said. They climbed down fast. Reverend Paul was waiting with 2 horses already saddled. "These are from the stable next door. I figured you'd need them. God go with you both." Jake wanted to thank him, but there was no time. They burst out the back door of the church, mounted up, and rode hard for the ravine. Behind them, guns opened up. Bullets whined off rocks and tree branches. Jake's horse stumbled on the steep bank, but recovered. Lucy rode like she'd been born in the saddle, leaning low over her horse's neck, her coat streaming behind her. They made it to the creek as full darkness fell. Behind them, angry shouts echoed through the ravine. Garrett's men were coming, but they'd lost the light advantage. Jake led the way north, following the creek by moonlight, heading toward a ranch that might already be burning, riding beside a woman he'd known for less than an hour, running from men who wanted them both dead. Part 3, the creek ran silver under the moon as they pushed their horses north. Jake kept glancing back, watching for pursuit, but the darkness behind them stayed empty. Lucy rode in silence, her eyes constantly scanning the shadows. After an hour, the creek widened into a natural pool surrounded by cottonwood trees. Jake held up his hand and they stopped. "The horses need rest. We're still 3 miles from my ranch." Jake dismounted and led his horse to the water. His ribs throbbed where the bullet had grazed him, and his shirt was stiff with dried blood. Lucy swung down and checked her guns, removing the spent cartridges and reloading with smooth, practiced movements. "They'll be at your ranch by now. Cordell knows the territory. He'll figure out where we were heading, maybe. But my ranch hand Danny and his 2 sons are there. They're all veterans from the Apache campaigns. If Garrett's men try anything, they'll get a fight." Jake pulled off his ruined shirt and examined the wound. The bleeding had stopped, but the flesh was angry and red. "Let me see that." Lucy moved closer, producing a small medical kit from her saddlebag. She cleaned the wound with whiskey that made Jake hiss through his teeth and bound it with clean cloth. Her hands were surprisingly gentle. Up close, Jake could see that the scar on her face was old, long-healed, How'd you get that? He asked. My father. Whiskey bottle when I was 14. I left home the next day and never went back. She finished tying the bandage and stepped away. Don't go feeling sorry for me. I've done plenty of things that would curl your hair. The wanted poster doesn't tell half of it. You could tell me the other half. Lucy sat down against a tree trunk, her guns within easy reach. Started out stealing food to survive. Graduated to horses. Fell in with the wrong crowd in Tucson and ended up riding with them for 2 years. We robbed stages, held up small-town banks, never killed anyone who didn't draw on us first. Then the law got serious about tracking us down. Most of the gang got caught or killed. I made it to Kansas City and went straight, got work at a saloon. That's where I met Garrett's brother. Andy told you about the gold? He was dying, delirious with fever. Kept saying he needed to tell someone where they'd buried it, like it was weighing on his soul. I listened because nobody else would. When Garrett showed up and found his brother dead, he decided I must have a map or instructions. Started asking around, offering money for information about me. I knew what that meant, so I ran. She looked at Jake with those hard eyes. When I saw Catherine's name on the passenger list, when I heard she died, I saw a chance. A respectable cowboy with a legal homestead claim, waiting for a bride nobody had ever met. I thought I could hide here for a few months, maybe even help you prove up your claim while Garrett cooled off. I didn't plan on leading him straight to you. Nothing ever goes according to plan. Jake checked his horse and then sat down across from her. What's the real reason you want that gold? You planning to go straight again? I'm planning to have choices. With that much money, I could buy land somewhere far away, hire people to work it, live like a normal person instead of always looking over my shoulder. I'm tired of running, tired of sleeping with one eye open. She pulled her hat lower. What about you? Why'd you send for a mail-order bride? Jake was quiet for a long moment. Loneliness. I'm 32 years old and I've spent the last decade working myself into the ground on that ranch. My parents are dead, my brothers moved east, and I wake up every morning to empty rooms and silence. I wanted a family. I wanted to hear another person's voice at the breakfast table. I wanted something to work for besides more cattle and more land. That's the saddest thing I've heard in a long time. Maybe, but at least it's honest. They rested for 20 minutes, then mounted up again. The moon had climbed higher, turning the landscape into a study in silver and black shadows. Jake's ranch lay in a valley between two low hills, protected from the worst winter winds but visible from higher ground. As they approached, Jake saw smoke rising from his chimney and lights in the windows. No signs of trouble. Danny came out of the barn with a rifle when he heard the horses. He was a lean man in his 50s with gray hair and watchful eyes. When he saw Jake's bloody shirt and Lucy's guns, he whistled low. What kind of trouble did you find in town? The worst kind. Jake quickly explained what had happened. Danny listened without interrupting, his face growing more serious with each detail. Garrett's gang. I've heard of them. They hit a bank in Santa Fe last year, killed 2 guards. Danny looked at Lucy. You're either very brave or very foolish to cross men like that. Probably both, Lucy said. Danny's 2 sons, Pete and Sam, came out of the bunkhouse carrying rifles. They were both in their 20s, hard men who'd seen violence and weren't afraid of it. Jake felt better having them there. 5 armed people could defend the ranch house if it came to that. How many are we expecting? Pete asked. 5, including Cordell. Maybe less if the wounded one didn't make it. Jake looked around at his ranch, the place he'd built with his own hands, the barn he'd raised, the fences he'd mended, the fields he'd plowed. He wasn't ready to give it up without a fight. We fortify the house and wait. If they come at us, we have the advantage of position and cover. Or, Lucy said quietly, we go after them first. Hunt the hunters. Everyone turned to look at her. She stood in the moonlight, her hand resting on her gun, her scarred face determined. They'll expect us to run or hide. They won't expect us to come at them. If we can take out Cordell, the rest might scatter. He's the glue holding that gang together. That's suicide, Sam said. That's survival. Lucy looked at Jake. We take the fight to them on our terms, or we wait here while they burn us out, or starve us out, or just wait until we make a mistake. I've been hunted before. I know how this ends if we stay defensive. Jake felt the weight of the decision pressing down on him. Danny and his sons were good men, loyal men, but they had families of their own in the nearby town. He had no right to ask them to ride into a fight that wasn't theirs. But Lucy was right about one thing. Waiting here, Garrett's men would have all the advantages. Where would they be? Jake asked. They'll make camp somewhere with water and cover, somewhere they can watch the approaches to your ranch. My guess is the old copper mine about 2 miles east. It's abandoned, but the buildings are still standing and there's a spring there. I know the place. Jake looked at Danny. I'm not asking you and your boys to come. This is my fight. Danny spat tobacco juice into the dirt. Hell, Jake, you think we're going to let you ride off alone with this outlaw woman? Pete, Sam, get the horses ready? We ride in an hour. Part 4, they rode through the darkness like ghosts, 5 riders on a mission that could end with all of them dead. Jake led the way, with Lucy beside him and Danny's sons following. The old copper mine sat in a natural bowl surrounded by rocky hills, a perfect defensive position that was almost impossible to approach without being seen. Almost. There's a ventilation shaft on the north side, Jake said as they dismounted a half-mile from the mine. It was part of the original digging, goes down about 40 feet and comes out inside the main building. My father used to tell stories about the miners using it as an escape route when there were cave-ins. Can we all fit? Lucy asked. It'll be tight, but yes. Jake checked his guns one more time. His ribs ached, but the bleeding hadn't started again. We go in quiet. Find Cordell first. Take him out, and the rest might surrender. They moved on foot through the scrub brush, staying low, using the shadows. The moon was setting now, leaving the land dark except for stars. As they got closer, Jake could see firelight flickering through the broken windows of the mine buildings. Voices carried on the still air, rough men laughing and arguing. The ventilation shaft was exactly where Jake remembered, a square hole in the ground covered with rotted boards. They pulled the boards away carefully, trying not to make noise. Lucy went first, lowering herself into the darkness with her guns drawn. Jake followed, then Pete, Sam, and Danny. The shaft was narrow and the walls were rough stone that scraped their shoulders. Jake could hear rats scurrying away below them. They dropped, one by one, into a storage room thick with dust and cobwebs. A door led to a hallway that ran toward the main chamber where the firelight was coming from. They moved in single file, weapons ready, barely breathing. Jake's heart hammered so hard he was sure everyone could hear it. At the end of the hallway they could see into the main room. 4 men sat around a fire, passing a bottle and cleaning their guns. Cordell stood apart from them, studying a map spread on an old table. The wounded man from town was there too, his arm in a crude sling, his face pale. The ranch has to be close, Cordell was saying.
We'll hit it at dawn. No survivors.
Henderson and the woman first, then anyone else we find. What about the gold? One of the men asked. We make the woman talk first. Then we kill her. Cordell folded the map. I want Henderson to watch. Want him to know what happens to people who cross us. Jake felt Lucy tense beside him. He put a hand on her arm, shaking his head slightly. They needed to get closer. Needed better positions. But before they could move, a rat ran across Sam's boot. Sam jerked involuntarily, and his rifle butt hit the wall with a sharp crack. A sound echoed through the old mine like a gunshot. Cordell's head snapped up. We got company. Everything went to hell. The outlaws scattered, grabbing weapons, overturning the table for cover. Jake and his group burst into the room firing. The space filled with gun smoke and the deafening roar of weapons. Jake saw Pete go down, clutching his leg. Danny returned fire, dropping one of the outlaws. Lucy moved like water, rolling behind a pile of old timber, her guns spitting flame. Cordell was fast, faster than Jake expected. He got behind a support beam and fired twice, bullets whining past Jake's head. The wounded man tried to run for the exit, and Sam shot him in the back. That left 3 outlaws and Cordell against 5 defenders, but Pete was wounded and couldn't move well. The battle became a chaos of muzzle flashes and ricochets. Jake fired at shadows, trying to track Cordell through the smoke. A bullet tugged at his sleeve. Another one knocked his hat off. He dropped, rolled, came up behind a mining cart, and fired 3 times at where he'd seen movement. A scream told him he'd hit someone. Lucy was advancing on Cordell's position, moving from cover to cover with deadly precision. Danny and Sam were laying down, suppressing fire, keeping the other outlaws pinned. The air was thick with powder smoke and the smell of blood. Then Jake saw his opening. Cordell had moved to get a better angle on Lucy, exposing his left side. Jake didn't hesitate. He stood up, aimed carefully despite the chaos around him, and pulled the trigger. The bullet caught Cordell high in the chest, spinning him around. Cordell's gun fell from his hand and he dropped to his knees, blood spreading across his shirt. "Drop your weapons!" Jake shouted at the remaining outlaws. "Cordell's done. You don't have to die for him." The 2 surviving gang members looked at each other, looked at their dying leader, and threw down their guns. The sudden silence after all the gunfire was deafening. Jake's ears rang as he walked toward Cordell. The outlaw was still alive, but barely, blood bubbling at his lips. "Where's Garrett?" Lucy demanded, standing over him with her gun pointed at his head. Cordell coughed, spraying blood. "Coming. Be here tomorrow with 10 more men. You're all dead." He tried to laugh, but it came out as a wet gurgle. Then his eyes went blank and he slumped over. Lucy looked at Jake, her face grim. "He's telling the truth. Garrett won't stop until we're all dead or he gets that gold." We bought ourselves some time, but not much. Pete was conscious, but in pain. The bullet had gone clean through his calf. Sam bandaged him while Danny secured the 2 prisoners. Jake sat down heavily on a barrel, suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline was draining away, leaving him shaky and cold despite the warm night. "We need that gold," Lucy said. "It's the only thing Garrett wants more than revenge. We get it. We can use it as leverage." "You mean give it to him?" Jake couldn't believe what he was hearing. "No, I mean use it as bait. Draw him out to a place of our choosing, where we can end this once and for all." She reloaded her guns with steady hands. "The gold's buried in a canyon 30 miles north. Narrow entrance, steep walls, only one way in or out. If we can lure Garrett there, we can trap him." Danny spoke up. "That's Devil's Canyon you're describing." "I know it. She's right about the geography. It's perfect for an ambush if you don't mind risking getting trapped yourself." "We're already trapped," Lucy said. "At least this way we choose the cage." Part 5. They rode north as the sun came up. 5 people with 1 wounded, 2 prisoners bound and gagged on horses, heading toward a canyon that could be either their salvation or their grave. Jake had left a note at his ranch for any survivors, explaining what had happened and where they'd gone. If Garrett killed them all, at least someone would know the truth. The land grew rougher as they traveled, rising into foothills covered with pine and scrub oak. Devil's Canyon cut through the landscape like a wound, a narrow slash in the earth with walls that rose 200 feet straight up. The entrance was barely wide enough for 2 horses to pass side by side. Inside, the canyon ran for half a mile before dead-ending at a rockfall. "The gold's buried under that rockfall," Lucy explained as they scouted the canyon. "Garrett's brother said they caused it deliberately to hide the loot. It'll take hours of digging to get to it." "Which is exactly what we want," Jake said, seeing the plan come together. "We start digging, make sure Garrett knows we're here. He'll come with all his men, bottleneck them at the entrance. We'll have the high ground and clear fields of fire. It's still 10 men against 5, and one of us is wounded," Sam pointed out. Pete was pale and feverish, the leg wound getting worse despite Danny's doctoring. "Then we need to make every shot count." Lucy looked at each of them in turn. "I won't blame anyone who wants to ride away now. This isn't your fight. You've already risked more than anyone should have to." Danny spat tobacco juice. "We came this far. Might as well see it through." They spent the morning preparing. Jake and Sam climbed the canyon walls and found positions among the rocks where they could shoot down into the entrance. Danny stayed at the far end with Pete, guarding the digging site and providing covering fire if needed. Lucy positioned herself behind a boulder 50 yards from the entrance, where she could hit anyone trying to push through. Then they started digging. The work was hard and slow, moving rocks and debris from the old cave-in. Jake kept glancing at the sky, expecting to see riders appear at any moment. They dug for 2 hours before Lucy's shovel hit something metal. A strong box, iron-bound and heavy. They dragged it clear and broke the lock with a pickaxe. Gold bars gleamed in the sunlight, more wealth than Jake had ever seen in his life. 40 or 50 pounds of pure gold, enough to buy land, cattle, a whole new life somewhere far away. Lucy stared at it with an expression Jake couldn't read. "Is it what you expected?" he asked. "It's heavier than I imagined. Not the gold. The weight of all the bad decisions that led here." She looked at him. "You ever think about how one choice can change everything? If I hadn't talked to Garrett's brother that night, if you hadn't stood up for me in town, if Catherine hadn't died of cholera. All the time. But I can't regret what happened. You're alive. I'm alive. That matters more than what might have been." Before Lucy could respond, Sam whistled from above. "Riders coming. A lot of them." They could see the dust cloud before they saw the horses. 12 riders, maybe more, coming fast. Jake's stomach clenched. They'd expected 10. Garrett had brought reinforcements. The riders reached the canyon entrance and pulled up, studying the narrow opening. A man who had to be Garrett rode to the front. He was younger than Jake expected, maybe 40, with a hawk face and cold eyes. "Henderson!" Garrett shouted, his voice echoing off the canyon walls. "I know you're in there! Send out Lucy Morgan and the gold, and the rest of you can ride away free." Jake looked at Lucy. She shook her head. "No deals, no surrender." Jake cupped his hands and shouted back, "The gold's here. Come and get it." Garrett laughed, the sound harsh and ugly. "Have it your way, boys. Kill them all." The first wave came in hard, 6 riders spurring their horses into the canyon. Jake and Sam opened fire from above, their bullets kicking up dust and blood. 2 riders fell immediately. The others tried to turn back, but the entrance was jammed with more men trying to push through. Lucy's guns barked from her position, precise and deadly. Another man went down, then another. The gang pulled back, leaving 4 bodies and wounded horses screaming in the narrow space. Jake reloaded with shaking hands. That was just the first attempt. Garrett would try again, maybe on foot, maybe with covering fire. The sun was directly overhead now, beating down into the canyon like a furnace. The second attack came from 2 directions. Half the gang rushed the entrance on foot, while the other half tried to climb the canyon walls on the south side. Jake and Sam focused on the climbers, picking them off as they struggled up the steep rock face. Lucy held the entrance alone, firing and moving, making herself impossible to pin down. But the outlaws were gaining ground. One man made it over the wall and landed on the canyon floor near Lucy's position. She spun and shot him, but not before he got off a round that hit her in the shoulder. She cried out and fell behind her boulder. Jake saw red. He abandoned his position and half climbed, half fell down the canyon wall, racing toward Lucy. He reached her as 3 more outlaws burst through the entrance. Jake fired twice, hitting one, missing the others. They took cover and returned fire. Bullets spanged off rocks all around them. Lucy was bleeding badly, her left arm useless. She was trying to reload her right-hand gun with one hand and failing. Danny appeared from the far end of the canyon, his rifle booming. He caught one outlaw on the side and drove the other back. Sam was still firing from above, keeping the rest pinned at the entrance. But they were running out of ammunition and time. Jake could see Garrett organizing another push, this one with everyone at once. "We can't hold them," Lucy gasped through pain. "Too many. Then we bring the walls down." Jake looked up at the canyon walls, at the loose rock and scree that covered them. His father had told him stories about avalanches in these canyons, how a loud noise or a fallen boulder could bring tons of rock crashing down. It was desperate and dangerous, but it might be their only chance. Danny. "Sam, shoot the walls. Bring them down." Jake started firing at the loose rock above the entrance. His bullets sparked off stone, dislodging pebbles that became rocks, that became boulders. Danny understood immediately and added his rifle fire. Sam did the same from his high position. The canyon walls began to groan. Cracks appeared in the rock face. Small slides became bigger ones. Garrett saw what was happening and screamed for his men to fall back, but it was too late. With a roar like thunder, the north wall collapsed. Thousands of tons of rock poured down into the narrow entrance, crushing men and horses, filling the space with choking dust and debris. The avalanche seemed to go on forever. When it finally stopped, the entrance to Devil's Canyon was completely blocked. Jake couldn't see Garrett or any of his men through the dust and rubble. They'd either been killed or trapped on the other side. Silence fell over the canyon, broken only by falling pebbles and Lucy's labored breathing. Jake knelt beside her and examined her shoulder. The bullet had gone through clean, but she'd lost blood. He bound the wound as best he could while Danny and Sam climbed down from their positions. "Is it over?" Pete asked weakly from the far end of the canyon. "For now." Jake looked at the blocked entrance, at the gold still sitting in its strong box, at Lucy's pale face. "But we're trapped too. It'll take days to dig our way out. Then we dig." Lucy managed a painful smile.
"We've got time. We've got time."
"We've got each other. That's more than we had yesterday." They camped in the canyon that night, taking turns keeping watch in case any of Garrett's men had survived and found another way in. But the walls stayed quiet. Jake sat beside Lucy, changing her bandages, making sure she drank water. She'd saved his life 3 times in 2 days. He'd saved hers twice. That created a bond stronger than marriage vows or mail-order contracts. "What now?" Lucy asked him, as the stars came out above the canyon walls. "Now we dig out. Get you and Pete to a doctor. Figure out what to do with the gold and the story we're going to tell." Jake looked at her in the firelight. "And then, if you're willing, we make that mail-order marriage real. I still need a wife to prove up my homestead claim. You still need a place to hide. We work well together when people are shooting at us. Might as well see how we do in peacetime." Lucy laughed, then winced as the movement hurt her shoulder. "That's the worst proposal I've ever heard. And I'm saying yes anyway. But I'm keeping my guns and I'm not learning to cook. I wouldn't expect anything less. They dug for 3 days before they broke through the rock fall. On the other side, they found 2 of Garrett's men still alive, including Garrett himself, trapped under a boulder with both legs crushed. He died cursing them as they rode away. A surviving gang member they turned over to the sheriff in Copper Ridge, along with a story about defending themselves against outlaws. The gold they buried again, this time on Jake's ranch, hidden in the floor of his barn. They took out enough to pay for doctors and supplies and kept the rest for emergencies. Jake and Lucy were married by Reverend Paul in a quiet ceremony with only Danny and his sons as witnesses. The marriage was strange at first, 2 people who'd met during a gunfight trying to figure out how to live together in peace. But they learned. Lucy proved to be good with cattle and better with accounts. Jake learned that having someone to talk to made the lonely ranch house feel like a home. They never spoke about Catherine or what might have been. The past was gone and the future was uncertain, but the present was theirs. A year later, Lucy gave birth to a daughter they named Hope. She had her mother's fierce eyes and her father's steady hands. Danny said she'd grow up to be quite a woman, and Jake believed him. Sometimes at night, when Hope was sleeping and Lucy was sitting beside him on the porch watching the sunset, Jake thought about that day at the stagecoach station when his whole life had changed. He'd been waiting for a bride and gotten an outlaw instead. It was the best mistake that had ever happened to him.